I live in the South, in a town that was built along the Natchez Trace. For anyone who doesn't know, the Natchez Trace is a very long stretch of road that runs almost the entire length of the United States, from north to south. It was used by tribes way back when to quickly get around the country, for trade, and during the Civil War. It was used by both Union and Confederate soldiers for travel. It is a federally protected land now and feels very isolated. No one is allowed to build anything within a mile of the trace, and there are no streetlights, just a 2-lane road. There are burial mounds, even unnamed Civil War graves, and lots of offshoot hiking trails. It is extremely illegal to dig up anything, etc. In my town, it isn't uncommon to go hiking out there because it's absolutely beautiful, but there were stories about being careful. I remember in the 90s, a young woman was killed out there while hiking, and there were all these sorts of boogeyman stories about not being out there on the trace after dark. Hiking the trace was something that I and my friends used to do a lot when we were young. We used to go off trail often because you can find some really cool stuff back there. One day, I and a buddy were out there going through some trails and checking stuff out like we always did. It was in the spring and not quite summer yet, but the days were starting to get longer. It wasn't super late, but it was later than we were usually out. Just barely dusk. We were about an hour or two into hiking and had gone off the trail like usual. Come up on this break in the trees that opened up in this big open field, and there's an old truck out there. That alone was a huge red flag, because you can't use any vehicles off-road there, but there were 2 dudes next to the truck with shovels and enough dirt next to them that you could tell they'd been digging a pretty big hole for a while. The bed of the truck was open, but we couldn't see inside it from where we were. They looked up at us, and there was like this weird second or two where nobody said anything yet. I don't remember who moved first, but I remember the dudes both jumping into the truck, starting it up, and driving full speed toward us. We ran back into the trees in a panic because we thought for sure they were going to run us down. I remember hearing the truck stop at the trees behind us as we ran, and hearing them get out yelling. We ran for what felt like a solid couple of minutes before we jumped into a deadfall of broken trees, and just stayed as quiet as we could. We could hear them a ways off and could hear dogs barking as well, like they had dogs with them, and I specifically remember hearing one of them yell at some point, "Can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." Just stayed quiet and didn't move because we never heard them get close enough that we thought they would actually spot us. Eventually, we heard the truck start up again in the distance and stayed out until we couldn't hear it anymore. And then we carefully walked back to the car without saying a word. I remember the whole ride home we were quiet, and every pair of headlights we saw made me almost have a heart attack because I thought it was going to be them looking for us. I never found out what they were doing there, but it must have been something bad. When I was younger, my brain always went to the obvious cliche, like somebody hiding a body, mostly because it would be a good spot to do it. No one looks for stuff out there. But as I get older, I began to think that it was probably either dirty money or drug stashes. The town is also small enough that I've always wondered if I ever ran into these people again out in public and just not known it, getting groceries or running errands. How many times have I been a car or two behind them at a stoplight? To this day, it gives me the willies. It was a Sunday early in the morning. I live in the suburbs, but my parents own a farm that I enjoy going to because I get to see my dog. Her name is Molly. She's a mutt, but she's not a tiny dog by any means. At that time, I felt very safe around her and would often take her for walks in a forest that was nearby. The day started off like any other. I and my dad got in the car, drove around for a while, and arrived at the farm. I immediately got out of the car and hugged Molly. My parents always got angry when I hugged her since I'd smell like her for the rest of the day. I put her leash on and asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. He always thought we would just go down a road and back, but I always found it more interesting to take her to the forest. I always felt a certain kind of peace and relaxation there that was unmatched by anything else. So we took a turn and headed to the forest. Usually when we got there, I'd take her leash off so she could explore on her own. Most of the time, I'd carve my name into the trees or look for anything interesting. I was playing baseball with some rocks in a wooden leg, presumably from an old table, and then I heard it. Molly was barking at something. This wasn't usual when we were in the forest. I thought it was a fox or some other animal, so I quickly grabbed the wooden leg like a weapon. I knew that if it was a fox, I wouldn't attack it, but I had a sense of security while I was holding it. I called out, "Molly, Molly," but she just kept barking. This was very strange for me since she always came to me when I called her. I followed the sound of her barks and stumbled across a scene I'll never forget. There was a man, probably in his late 50s, half naked, carrying a large machete in one hand and holding moonshine on the other. This was the first time that I stumbled across somebody in the woods, let alone somebody half naked and carrying a big-ass machete. He was completely ignoring Molly and hacking away at the ground for some reason. I didn't really know how to handle this situation. Even now, I have no idea how I would handle it. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked in confusion. I don't think I understood the seriousness of the situation at the time. He turned around, revealing his face. He had some of the clearest blue eyes I have ever seen to this day. I could see them so well because they were open wide. "Come here, boy. Look what I've dug up." I was afraid that if I didn't listen to him, he would start chasing after me, and that was something I wanted to avoid at all costs, of course. I got closer but kept a good distance. I didn't see anything except for an empty hole. He returned to hitting the ground with his machete, occasionally taking sips from the bottle. I used this window of time to get my dog and started walking away slowly, as to not notify him that I was leaving. But then I took one final glance at the man. His head was dug deep in the hole. I was intrigued, so I kept looking. I know it might be stupid of me. He finally got up from the ground. I was shocked when I saw him carrying a bone in his mouth. I have no idea what animal it belonged to, if it even did belong to an animal. I had seen enough and started sprinting with my dog. As we ran, I heard him laughing, and then I saw something flying from the corner of my eye. It was that machete. I heard him yell, "Damn it." This made me run even faster. I know the forest very well, so I wasn't afraid of getting lost. I ripped through the branches and bushes until I got out of the forest, but I didn't stop sprinting till I arrived at the garage, where my father was testing out lights on our tractor. I didn't tell him a single thing about the man, since I was afraid that he'd get angry and wouldn't allow me to walk Molly anymore. Needless to say, I never went to that forest alone ever again. Last December, the engine in my POS car started knocking and eventually gave out, as did the transmission. Seeing as it would be more expensive to fix it than it would to buy a new car, I scrapped it for a few $100 and put the word out I was looking to buy a car in the $2,000 to $2,500 range. I was, and still do, work 2 jobs, so I very quickly grew tired of having to bum rides to work. This fact led me to ignore a few red flags, but I'll get to that. One of my jobs is a corporate 9 to 5. The other is at an upscale gentleman's club. I put the word out about needing a new car to my coworkers at both places. A month went by and I still hadn't heard anything when a waitress at the club pulled me aside. One of my customers offered me a really good deal on a car, but my parents bought me a brand new Escape, so I don't need it. He wants $1,000 for an '06 Chevy with low mileage. Do you want me to introduce you to him? It seemed perfect. I quickly agreed, and she led me over to the back of the bar to a booth where a tall, broad-shouldered older man sat. He looked about 60 years old, but was still pretty huge, even sitting down. He looked like a retired army guy with a small beer gut, but lots of old man muscle, if you get me. "Mark, this is Dryer Fresh Socks." "Dryer Fresh Socks, this is Mark." She introduced us as I sat down next to him. He didn't look at me or acknowledge me. I got the feeling he was very awkward. My coworker excused herself and left us. I quickly explained that I was looking for a new car. He finally looked at me and began explaining the deal. It was his brother's wife's car. They lived 1 state over, about 4 hours away. They initially bought the car for their daughter, brand new, but she had a baby a few years later and refused to drive it anymore because it was a 2-door and the baby's car seat didn't fit behind the seat. It had been sitting for years, but now their neighbor, who was a cop, was threatening them, saying that if they didn't put the insurance on it or get rid of it, they'd be ticketed. So now they were looking to unload it as quickly as possible, hence the great deal. I was beyond excited. Mark and I chatted a little longer, albeit awkwardly, and eventually exchanged numbers. Before I went back to work, the subject of art came up, and he mentioned that he'd always wanted to learn how to draw. I got excited because at the time I was giving private drawing lessons to make extra money. He seems interested after I show him my portfolio on my phone, and he suggested maybe even knocking the price down a little in exchange for a few lessons. I wrap up our goodbyes and head back to work. He exits my work shortly. I'm ecstatic. At 3 a.m., I'm finally back in civilian clothes, waiting inside the front doors for my ride when Mark texts me. "Can you come to my house for the drawing lessons this week?" I politely tell him I don't feel comfortable with that because he would have to pick me up and I'd be dependent on him to take me home too. He's a stranger, it just doesn't feel right. All the more reason for you to get this car. You deserve it. I agree, brushing off the second half of the sentence. He's probably just a little lonely and trying to be nice. We set up a date to meet in a public place so I can check the car out. He plans on paying his niece to make the 4-hour drive the following Tuesday, 5 days from now. I agree. She doesn't mind because her parents are going to let her keep whatever money I pay for it, and Mark will pay for her gas there and back, plus a tip. I forget about Mark for a day or two, until the texts start. All hours of the day, the most random questions, but all of them pertaining to the car/deal/art, so I don't think too much into it. He's never been married, claims he has Asperger's, which I found out later is a lie, and that he only has his brother, no one else. I figure he's doing me a favor. I can answer a few harmless texts, right? But then I miss a few at work, and he spams me, getting progressively madder with each text. When I finally respond, I bitch him out, saying he has no right to my time or attention. He relents, saying he thought something bad happened to me. That's all, and that he wasn't getting mad and he was scared. I think back to about what he said about having Asperger's, and I think maybe I'm misunderstanding his text. I felt kind of bad. He stops for a few days, then Tuesday rolls around. I bring my mom's boyfriend with me to the parking lot I'm meeting him, and his niece had to look at the car. It's beautiful and I love it. My mom's boyfriend says it's a great deal, and I'd be stupid not to take it. I tell Mark I want it. He spent the whole interaction silent, seemingly intimidated by my mom's 5'1" boyfriend, which is hilarious. The niece drives the car back home. Because the title is in his sister-in-law's name, I have to go to her house 4 hours away to have her sign the title over to me. Mark says he had a doctor's appointment at a hospital about 30 minutes from there, so I can ride down there with him and drive myself home. I agree to the plan. We set the date for next Wednesday. Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., my mom drops me off at Mark's house. I assume his appointment is at 9 or 10 a.m. since he wants to leave so early. He tells me it's at 1 p.m. I ask him why the heck we were leaving so early if the hospital is only 3.5 hours away. He ignores my question, but I have my answer soon enough. This dude has to stop at every rest stop. Literally every single one. It takes us 6 hours to get to the hospital, almost making us late for his appointment. We park the car and I tell him to ask one of the concierge people where we're supposed to be. It's a huge hospital. And then he said something that made my jaw drop. I'm not talking to one of those insert racial slur here that I'm not going to repeat. And he basically screamed it. He's getting frantic, and I'm starting to see he's a little unhinged, but yeah, I'm 3 hours from home and he's already got my $1,000, so I can't really back out now. I ask directions and find the elevator to the floor we need to be on, the 8th floor. Mark won't get in, and he says he doesn't do elevators, that they'll kill him. Randomly, a mentally handicapped man in a wheelchair next to us repeats the words, "It will kill us." Mark yells, "See? He knows." I'm out of patience. I yank him into the elevator and we finally arrive at his appointment, just on time. I quickly fall asleep in the lobby because he would not let me sleep in the car, knowing I'd worked until 3 a.m. the night before. I awaken to the sound of Mark screaming at the top of his lungs at the poor clerk behind the desk in the lobby. He's calling her every name in the book. You name it. She looks terrified and screams back that she's calling security. I hop up, grab him by the arm and drag him, literally running back to the elevator. He opens his mouth to protest, but I tell him to shut the F up and get in the elevator. I'm in no mood for this at all. I refuse to be stranded across state lines because he had to land himself in the slammer for who knows what reason. We exit the elevator just as a team of security guards enters it and rush past them, trying to look normal. We finally get outside and I lose my cool. What the heck happened, man? I was waiting for the doctor and I had to use the bathroom. He came to my room while I was gone, so he skipped me to get the next patient. He wouldn't be back for an hour. What does the receptionist have to do with that? I said. She was in on it. She could have told me he was an asshole. I just stare at him in complete disbelief. I fully realize I am dealing with a mentally unstable individual, but I'm locked into the steel and I'm 30 minutes from being able to drive the F away, so I just shake my head and walk back to this car silently. We finally get to his brother's house. The title is signed over to me. All is good, except the port for the car charger in my new car doesn't work and my phone is dead and I have no idea how to get home. I ask Mark if I can charge my phone in his car for a while. He says yes. I start to follow him home. It's getting really late at this point and I'm so exhausted I beg him to please skip a few rest stops. He skips 2, then pulls into a rest area. He hops out of the car with a childish grin. You like what I did there? I skipped 2. I check my phone. 50%. Good enough. I'm so done with this guy, I thought. I tell him goodbye and thanks, but I'm going to take off now. He seems confused. I ignore it and absolutely floor it home. Then the texts start. Zoom zoom, little girl. Let's see if you find the secret of the wire. You won't make it far, little girl. Zoom. There she goes. I'm absolutely creeped out, but I ignore it, and as soon as the SOS is open, I have registration and insurance on the car. The texts start to get worse. Tell your pimp you screwed up. I have a lot of money. Don't ignore me. Think that car is safe? Ah, you're silly. You're just a junkie. Wait till I go to the cops. You literally stole that car and you owe me $2,000. I'm talking to your pimp now because you're too stupid to come up with that kind of cash. Bring it to me Monday or I go to the cops and bust your little sex traffic ring. Variations of this all day until I block his number. I call Mark's brother just in case and tell him what's happened. He couldn't care less. He says to pay him. I said I did, and he asked if I have proof. I said of course. He gave you the money. Why would your wife sign the title over without getting paid? He asked if Mark knows where I live, and I say no. He says good. I start to get texts from a new number, this time claiming to be the cops. I know it's Mark, and I threaten to get a PPO if he doesn't stop. He goes absolutely ballistic. Tells me he knows where I live, where my kids go to school, who my pimp is, where I get my drugs, and I know he's lying because I don't have kids, a pimp, or a drug problem. I'm also not a prostitute. I'm still scared shitless, and all I can do is block this number too. I'm always looking over my shoulder leaving work. He attempts to get me fired from my job, but he's laughed out and banned. Months go by and I start to relax. I can still see if he texts me, even though he's blocked. It just goes to a different folder. I check it once in a while. For a few months, he sends completely normal texts, followed by psycho stuff when I don't respond. I know you love me and that's why you're doing this, because your dad is dead, so you don't know how to love. It hurts me too. Let's buy your kids some toys. You're just a whore. Zoom zoom. Do you like to ruin men's lives? Stop listening to your meth head stepbrother. Again, I have no kids. I realize he's just trying to scare me and legally the car is mine. He can't take it from me. I finally relax a little. Then I happen to be awake one day when the mail lady comes. She knocks and tells me I have to sign for something. She hands me a manila envelope with the name, Mark Smith, as the return address and my full name on it. And the back is stamped with notify sender stamps, like 100 of them, all erratically placed. My heart stops. He knows where I live, and as much as I'm dying to know what the letter says, I don't sign for it and tell her to return it to the sender and explain the situation. I realize he probably just looked up my name online and he's probably found 5 different addresses, then sent certified mail to all of them in my name in an attempt to verify which one I lived at. I screwed his plan up by not signing. Screw him. Now fast forward to 2 months ago, I'm home alone and I get a call from a number I don't know, but it's local so I pick it up. Hi, this is Officer Sanford with the City Fraud Division. Is this Dry or Fresh Socks? Oh no. I say yes. I believe we have a mutual friend here. My heart sinks. I know what he means. Definitely talking about Mark. Am I screwed? Oh, don't worry, I'm on your side. I think this girl is off his rocker. I've been looking into this for a while, and this just doesn't add up to you being guilty of anything but buying a car. Justice. Turns out, Mark walks into a police station to report the car that he never owned, and that I had the title to, mind you, stolen, and to report my prostitution ring. He was laughed out, so he wrote letters. Lots of them. To the government, to the president, to the sheriff. So, a city fraud investigator got involved. He spoke to the sister-in-law and she verified she signed the title over. Verified I had registration and insurance. Looked into my squeaky clean record. Even looked into my schooling and saw a very prestigious university. And he eventually spoke to Mark, face to face. And he obviously knew Mark was crazy. So he had me write a brief account of my side of the story. Advised me to get a restraining order. Told Mark to stay away from me, as well as the brother and sister-in-law actually, and closed the case. I was one of those kids you'd see walking around zoos or amusement parks wearing a leash. Those were already a thing 20 plus years ago, but less common and were initially only tied around the wrist. In my case, it was a necessity. I would always start wandering off from the rest of the family no matter what the situation was. This is one of the stories that led me to earning my leash. It happened when I was about 6 years old and I went to the zoo with my mom and sisters. Before every family outing, my mom made sure to give me the talk about not walking off again or facing the consequences. My mom was a strict parent that made good on her promises. She had to, being a single mother of 3. I didn't try to disobey her per se, but I often just didn't pay attention to the world and people around me. No different this day. I behaved and followed the group for a while, but then a butterfly garden caught my attention, and off I was. When I finally realized I had separated myself from my mom and sisters again, I panicked and started walking around the zoo looking for them, being afraid of my mom's reaction more than anything else. After a while, I somehow got it in my head that if I could just walk out, find our car, and wait there, my family would eventually find me. So I did. I got lost within a couple of minutes, walking around a strange neighborhood, looking for either our car or the way back to the zoo. But nothing looked familiar, and I started crying. I felt like my mom was going to be so mad. Then this man came up to me, just normal looking as far as I remember, about 40 years old, asking me if I'm lost. I explained I lost my family when we were visiting the zoo and I'm looking for my way back. I couldn't believe my luck when the man told me he had just come from the zoo and saw a family there standing near the entrance who were waiting for a little girl with blonde hair and a baseball cap. But it was still a few blocks away, so he proposed I walk with him to his car and we could drive the rest of the way back. Just the mention of his car finally made me hesitant. I told him I wasn't allowed to get in a car with strangers. He then said something like, "That was true, but I looked smart enough to know if I could trust somebody." Don't remember the exact words, but it was something like that. Also, he added he spoke to my parents earlier when they were looking for me, so he's not a complete stranger. That didn't seem right to me. I asked him if he really talked to my dad, who had died a year before, by the way, and when he said he did, I broke down crying uncontrollably. I still didn't understand the situation I was in. I was just really confused about everything and scared of how angry my mom was going to be after all this. Finally, my crying caught the attention of the security guard of a parking building we were standing next to, asking if there was something he could help with. The guy stepped aside with the security guard and started explaining the situation, but made it vaguely sound like he was my father and we were looking for his wife. The security guard seemed to believe him, pointing us in the right direction towards the zoo. The man thanked the security and proceeds to take my hand to walk away. The security guard takes a look past me and asks me, in a comforting, friendly, adult-to-child kind of way, why I'm still crying. I tell him that my dad is dead. He looks really confused for a few seconds, then asks if this man is not my dad. I tell him again, no, my dad is dead. In a split second, his whole face and posture changed, and he turns to look at the guy who's trying to explain he never actually said he was my dad, that the security guard must have misunderstood, and he was just helping me find my mom. The security said he appreciated the man's help, but he would take me off his hands now, and the guy immediately took off. I don't think there was much else the guard could have done. I explained the whole situation, and after making a phone call, he walked me to the entrance of the zoo, which was just around the corner from the parking building. From there, we were brought to the security office where my mom and sisters were already waiting. I feel extremely lucky for the security guard being at the right place at the right time that day, and very grateful for the extra second of time he took that could have made all the difference. When I was in high school, I was good friends with a girl called Emma. Emma was kind of quiet and shy, but always was there if you needed her. When I finished high school, I lost touch with her, as happens to a lot of friendships after school. 2 years later into college, I started dating a guy called Ben, and Ben's best friend, Gary, was Emma's boyfriend. After discovering we all knew each other, we started to hang out again. One of the nights we planned to all hang out was in Gary's house, have a few drinks and play a few games. I and Ben showed up at about 8 p.m. at Gary's house, and Gary said Emma should be over soon. That was fine. We opened our beers and started drinking. It was nearly 9 p.m. and Emma still wasn't here, so we decided to ring her. She answered and apologized for being late and said that she had just finished getting ready and should be there soon. At 9:30 p.m., there was still no sign of her, so we called again. This time, her younger brother picked up the phone. Her brother was 15 years old at the time and had told us that Emma was not feeling that well and was in the bathroom. Gary was worried and asked if he could head over and check on her, but her brother was adamant that he was looking after her and she was alright and told us to enjoy our night. We didn't go home. Instead, we kept drinking and hanging out because all we thought was Emma just had the simple flu. Just after 10 p.m., we decided to call one last time and check on her. Again, her brother answered and calmly told us that she had gone to bed and she would call in the morning. We left it at that, believing she was safe at home in bed and didn't want to annoy her brother by calling non-stop. That night, her mom returned home at 12 a.m. to find Emma dead on the kitchen floor. She had been bludgeoned to death by her younger brother a couple of hours earlier. We later found out when Emma was leaving to come to us. She and her brother got into a fight about something ridiculous, and he beat her with a baseball bat, then stabbed her over 51 times. Since her brother was a minor, he was not going to be sent to prison. Instead, her brother pleaded insanity and was sent to an institution. A lot of this information was not leaked, as the accused was a minor. I do know that his parents stuck by him, and he was released after 4 years though.